Hi everyone and welcome to the fourth episode in this series, The Definitive Guide to CAT. In today's video, we are going to talk about the CAT syllabus, so let's get started.
To book a free one-on-one MBA counseling online or at any IMS center, check out the link in the description box or the pinned comment below.
Now we'll be covering these points in this video, starting with what is the syllabus for the CAT. We'll talk about what kind of questions are asked, and then how do you build comfort and confidence in each of these sections. And then we'll close with what are the habits that you need to build for each of the sections so you're able to improve your performance. Now, in one of the initial videos, I remember telling you that CAT does not have an official syllabus. So then why are we covering it? So though there is no official syllabus that is published by the IMS, the conducting body, we know the scope within which CAT has operated in the last several years. So if you look at since inception, right, CAT has never asked some questions that are very random or very arbitrary. Though they have played with the difficulty and the format of the test, they haven't gone beyond a certain kind of questions. So firstly, it checks your aptitude, which is acquired over a period of time. And these are some of the things that have remained static when it comes to CAT. So what is it that it is checking? What is it that it is evaluating? So it is acquired aptitude over a period of time, right? Because if they were to check, let's say, subject knowledge, some particular set of students might have advantage. So let's say if they were to check management concepts, students who are coming from say BCom or management background would have an advantage. So that is why they don't want to do that. And that brings me to the second point, that they want to keep it a level playing field as much as possible. Though at this juncture, some of the students might say, then why are they asking 2 sections out of 3 sections which are related to maths and numbers in some way? But understand that these 3 things, the 3 sections that appear on the CAT, all of us have done it, whether you come from engineering background or non-engineering background. You have done these 3 in some capacity. So all of us, for example, we had English as a subject, right? Whether at a higher level or at a moderate level, it doesn't matter. All of us had mathematics, and all of us did a little bit of data interpretation. So interpreting data from, let's say, the sets that are given to us, or some bar charts and pie charts and things like that. So all of us have done it till about 10th standard. And that is the way CAT tries to achieve like a level playing field where no particular stream has major advantage or disadvantage. And finally, it is checking what? It is checking your ability to read, and that is why VARC exists as a section. Second, it is checking your ability to think critically and evaluate different options and come up with the most optimal solution or the appropriate response. That is why DILR section exists. And then finally, solve problems using mathematical skills, because whether you be at a manager position or go up the ladder, you're always going to have data with you, and that is why you have to have mathematical skills. So that is what CAT is checking essentially. Now let's talk about the individual sections. So we'll start with VRC, and that's the first section that you will face on the CAT. So 16 questions of RC, and RCs can come from any source, right? So they can be from business background, technology, science, history, geography, sociology, psychology, and whatever you can think of. So the RC passages can come from any source. They can be of any particular topic. The remaining questions, which are what we call the verbal ability questions, they are 8 questions at this point of time. Now, in these 8 questions, they are checking what? So in the last couple of years, what we have seen is, though they have played with the some of these question types, in some years, for example, they didn't ask a particular question type. In some years, they asked it again. The number of questions they have changed. So currently it is 2 of each. So that makes it 8 questions. But in the past, they have played with that as well. So parajumbles, summary, out of context, and paragraph completion. Now, what is parajumbles? They give you a set of sentences, and they are arranged in a jumbled manner. You have to figure out which is the logical order of that, and you have to enter it. Second is summary. So they give you a very short passage. You have to read it and then answer as to which is the best summary. Third is out of context. So a set of sentences are given to you. You have to identify which of the sentences does not fit the context. And finally, paragraph completion. So there is a paragraph given with a sentence that is removed, and you have to figure out which sentence will be there, correct? So these are the 4 question types that currently CAT is asking when it comes to the verbal ability section. So these two are not separate sections as such, but there are RC questions and then there are verbal questions. it's not that all 16 questions of RC will appear at the beginning and then you have VA questions. It may happen that you start your paper with a VA question, then you get one RC, and then there is another VA question, and so on. So they are spread throughout. Now what I've also done is I've given a table, but understand that this table is only for CAT 25. So every year, once the score and the result is published, we are able to figure out at what score, what percentile somebody got. So this is scaled score in VRC versus percentile. Now why this data is important is it gives you a perspective that, okay, how many questions will I need generally to get to a certain percentile. And of course, we're going to have an episode where we talk about the score versus percentile and all of that. But for now, you just need to know that, and as you can see, if my aim is to, let's say, score a 95 percentile, right? 95 percentile last year corresponded to a scaled score of 32 when it comes to the VRC section. In terms of raw, that may have been, say, a 30 or a 33, depending on the slot. But you can think of it as, okay, I at least need about 10 to 11 questions. So if you divide this second column by 3, roughly you will get the number of questions that you should be getting correct. And of course, you should be attempting more, considering that you might get a few negatives as well. So to get to a certain score, you may have to attempt slightly, maybe 1 or 2 questions more, factoring in the negative marking that you're going to get. But here, for example, if I get about 10-11 questions, I should be able to get there. So just keep this table with you, but again, for every year, this particular table is going to be different. All right. Now, one very important tip that I have, and that everybody, whether you're a pre-final year or a final year student or you're a graduate, you will have to do, which is when you prepare for the VRC section. Solving RCs is of course one way to prepare for it, solving the VA questions, which everybody will do. But one key thing that you should do is to read as much as you can and read from a variety of sources. The idea is to build comfort. So what happens with a lot of students, right, is they like a certain kind of reading. So maybe you like sports. So you're naturally drawn to the sports page of any newspaper and you will read that, you will enjoy it, and that's about it. But if I give you a philosophy passage, then you will struggle. So that's why you start reading from international sources as much as possible. It's not that CAT had some issue with Indian authors. It's just that if you look at, again, all the years of CAT, you will see that majority of the passages come from international sources, though there have been in the recent times some instances where Indian authors or passages written by Indians have appeared in the CAT. But otherwise, most of the passages are taken from these sources that you see on screen. Things like Aeon and Guardian, New York Times and New Yorker and all of those things. So if you read slightly difficult things, long reads for example, or go to website like Arts and Letters Daily, you'll find a collection of articles that you can go through to build comfort in reading anything and everything. Okay. All right. Now, just to give a sense of what kind of passages have been asked, right? Because it's very difficult to otherwise imagine that. So I've given the kind of topics which were asked in CAT 25, and this is from easy to difficult. So it's not that just because a topic is difficult, the passage will also be difficult. For example, maybe somebody might think that when it comes to philosophy, it's a difficult sort of an area. So it's not necessary that the passage from philosophy will also be difficult. And somebody might think that, oh, science and culture is pretty easy to read. But that may not be true. You can always have very intense and intricate kind of passage coming from science and culture. So last year, for example, you might see things like evolution of tetrafish, biases of AI, the Forest Act 1982, objections to electronic music. So they can ask anything, any walk of life, and they can pick passages from any sources. So just try and be as comfortable as you can. And the key to get there is to do a lot of reading. Of course, when you solve RCs, so as part of the IMS course where we give a lot of practice, the material that is given to students, you will be able to cover all of that. So don't worry about it. As you solve more RCs, you will get better at it. But yes, you have to read a lot. Now let's go to the next section. So DILR, the data interpretation logical reasoning section, I would say is the most trickiest. And if you ask any CAT aspirant or somebody who has taken CAT in the past, they will say that this is the most trickiest part. And why? Because firstly, there's no syllabus, okay, no published syllabus anywhere, and they can play around because it's just data in case of data interpretation, And in case of logical reasoning, it is some sort of logic. It could be arrangements, arranging objects or arranging things. It could be related to, let's say, games and tournaments. It could be related to binary logic. So a lot of things can be created. So let's go one by one. In data interpretation, essentially anything that has numbers in it is covered. So in CAT, there's no distinction, so to say, between what is D and what is LR. Though there, depending on numbers, presence or absence, you can decide whether it is D or LR set. So anything that has numbers in it, you will say, okay, this is data interpretation. Anything that is pure logic, for example, let's say some people are playing a particular game and there are certain rules that are given which does not have numbers in it, then that becomes like a logical reasoning set. So within DI, you're going to have tables with complete or incomplete information, graphs, pie charts, caselets, reasoning-based data interpretation or quant-based data interpretation. So essentially, some numerical information is given in the form of different, whether it is a line graph or a bar graph and so on. You have to interpret that information and answer questions based on it. When it comes to LR, they can do a lot of interesting things. So in one of the years, for example, they asked a question on 343 small cubes. So with numbers 1 to 343 written on it, and you have to also visualize it to be able to answer that question. So it sits sort of in between data interpretation and logical reasoning because it's mix of both. So there will of course be standalone LR caselets as well, where it is just out and out logical reasoning. For example, arrangements, right? Maybe there are n number of people and you have to arrange them in a particular way. Grouping and conditionalities, team formation questions, for example. So you have 4 females, you have 6 males, then there are some teachers, some musicians and all of that. And you're making a team for a particular event. So, and there are some conditions that are given. Then routes and networks. So what is like so there is a diagram that is given. You have to identify if you take which particular route, you might be able to, let's say, either save a lot of cost or save time and so on. Then binary logic, something called truth tellers and liars. So there are truth tellers, liars, and there are alternators. Venn diagrams, where it could be related to 3-set Venn or 4-set Venn diagrams. And then games and tournaments. Okay, so it's not limited to this. So don't think that this covers everything that is out there. But this covers most of the question types that will be asked in this particular thing. Now, how do you prepare for this? Obviously, you solve more and more sets, so that is always going to be there. And if you look at this, it will show you that it's not a very high scoring area. If you remember what the 95 equivalent was when it comes to VARC, that was much higher than what you see here. So there is a struggle that will happen in DILR. So people will typically not be able to solve a lot of sets. So out of 5 sets, for example, think of, let's say, getting a score of 21, right? It may happen by doing, let's say, 7 questions correct or 8 questions correct and then 3 questions wrong and so on, which means that somebody can do just about 2 sets and will still be able to get a 95%. So that is possible. This section tends to be tricky and difficult for a lot of students because even though they have practiced many questions, they don't understand where to start. Okay, so the more sets you solve, obviously, the better you will get at it. Now, what is one additional thing that I would want people to look at is solving a lot of logical puzzles. And people, when they start their preparation, they do it enough, but then they stop at a later point of time. See, all of us have a natural base aptitude, which means that if I give you a question paper of CAT, all of you will be able to score something, even without having done any sort of preparation. Why? Because all of us have a natural aptitude, which we have acquired over a period of time. The key that we want to have is, how do I improve this? How do I improve this in the remaining time that is available to me? And that is why if I solve more puzzles, it can be brain teasers like Sudoku, Kakuro, Ken, and things like that, because it will help you to naturally get better at pattern recognition, storing numbers in your head, which is a very important skill, and then figuring out different possibilities in your head. Because when you solve the Sudoku, for example, you look at rows and columns, right? And then you see, okay, fine, this particular number is here, so this cannot be there. And if this is here, then that cannot be there. So there are a lot of these case creation that will happen, and it is a very important skill to develop. So I would say if you do anything that engages your brain for some time, and it's in a creative way or a way where it will improve your natural aptitude. Anything that engages brain does not mean that you play some video games, but anything that will help you to build your natural aptitude. You should do that because that will help you to get faster and better at solving DILR caselets. Okay, now what kind of caselets were asked last year? Let's have a look at that. So for example, import export data of 5 countries, right? So out and out DI set. But you can also get things like, for example, maybe a scatter plot. So again, a DI set, currency exchange between 4 countries. You can have trade balance, import export kind of thing, something to do with musicians, 5 persons tapping yes or no, which is like a logical reasoning thing. So all of this, there are very, very different question types that you can get when it comes to the DILR section. Now let's move on to the last one. Now when it comes to quant, and this is the area that a lot of people are absolutely scared of, but I would say there is no reason to be scared, because the moment you get scared of any test of any particular section, you start thinking that you will not be able to conquer it. So the key is to not get scared of the section first of all. Now the fear is understandable because a lot of students may have not done math for a very long time, and that is why that fear is there. Or secondly, maybe they didn't get very good scores when they were in school, because of which it has become a problem for them to fall in love with the subject. I would say you don't have to love the subject, but you have to do enough to clear the test. And if you work with that, it will be a little easier for you. So what is asked on the CAT? Is it going to be things like limits and integration and matrices and so on? No. Nothing fancy. Everything that you have done till 10th standard, which is going to be numbers, arithmetic, algebra, geometry, and modern mathematics. So when you look at numbers in arithmetic, you are looking at about 10 to 12 questions. This is not fixed and it can change, but generally you will see majority of the questions coming from arithmetic. So topics such as number theory. Now in numbers you have number theory, you have HCF, LCM, you have a lot of other concepts that are there. But arithmetic is huge. So in arithmetic you start from percentages, profit loss discount, simple interest, compound interest, time, speed, distance, time and work, ratio, proportion, mixtures, allegations, averages, all of those things. And this is the important part of the whole thing. Then the other 3 areas, which are algebra, geometry, P&C probability, which a lot of people find generally slightly more difficult. Now in algebra, you start with linear equations, quadratic equations, you have functions, graphs, etc. In geometry, you have your regular thing like triangles, circles, and then polygons, so square, rectangle, rhombus, and things like that. You also have mensuration, so and all of that is formula based. So again, there's absolutely no reason why somebody should be scared of it. If you do your formula well and concepts well, I think it is definitely manageable. And finally, permutation, combination, and probability. So this tends to be a tricky area because you can create really difficult problems by just changing a couple of words here and there, like at least and at most. But again, don't get scared of it. It is definitely possible to prepare in a very structured manner for it. Again, if you look at the score versus percentile, you will realize that it's not very easy, and especially when it comes to the CAT 25 section, there were a lot of questions which demanded usage of calculator. So it was in fact a very good thing that CAT has an on-screen calculator. Otherwise, it would have been far more painful experience than what it was last year. So 95 percentile was around 18, but in the past, there have been easy quant sections also, moderate quant sections also. This was like a slightly difficult quant section, I would say. So getting about 6 questions correct would have given you 95 percentile, but as I said, this is scaled score. So it's not exact 6, it could have been say 7 questions in a particular section or 5 questions. Anyway, the important thing is to note that you can get to a higher score, higher percentile by solving fewer number of questions. So to get to a 98, you would have needed what, 8 correct questions. Is it possible to do that? The answer is yes, because somebody could have just done say numbers in arithmetic and you still would have managed. Why? Because when you look at the table, which I'll show you on the next slide, as to how many questions appeared from each area, you will realize it. One very important thing before we move there is to understand that preparation is one aspect, right? All of you will have the courseware, so you'll prepare from it. But one thing that separates people who are good at mathematics is that they are able to calculate faster. They are also able to visualize steps a little better. So I would say definitely work on your ability to calculate. You need not be very, very fast, but you have to know methods that you can use to arrive at faster answers. You also have to be able to approximate things, because it may happen that maybe there is a question which demands, okay, 19.5% of something. But is it really necessary that you calculate 19.5%? No. Maybe you can calculate 20%. But what is 20%? It is 1/5. So if you know that, you will be able to do some approximations. So your ability to calculate faster and approximate better is something that will help you in this section. Now, speaking of the individual areas, right? So if you look at slot 1, 2, 3, how many questions from each of the areas appeared last time? Arithmetic was clearly the dominant part, right? So 8 questions almost in each of the slots, and then algebra was about 4 to 5 questions. So even if somebody had done only arithmetic algebra, that person would have easily survived. But is that a sound strategy? The answer is no. So don't completely rely on 2 areas. So don't say that, okay, I'll prepare only arithmetic and algebra and rest I will not prepare. That's a very bad strategy, because for all you know, all those algebra questions that you get are insanely difficult questions, and maybe you're not able to solve anything. So that is why you don't over index on a particular area. You prepare well for all the 5 sub areas that are there, and then hope that, okay, I'll be able to solve n number of questions from that. And one thing that I didn't speak about on the last slide is that mindset itself. See, a lot of students, when it comes to quant, right, they're not scared of the syllabus. What they're scared of is firstly their ability itself to handle it. So for whatever reasons from the past, they have those bad experiences and they think that they'll not be able to study for this particular subject. So there's a mindset issue that has happened. So if you start telling yourself that, okay, this is a section where I need to get better, rather than convincing yourself that I am very bad at this section, you will have a better outcome. So you always need to have growth mindset when it comes to quant, that, hey, I can get better. Maybe today I'm able to solve only 3 questions, but tomorrow I'll be able to do 4. The day after tomorrow, I'll be able to do 8 questions. So if you have that mindset, quant becomes easy. So syllabus wise, this is the biggest part. So if you look at VARC syllabus that we saw, and there are very limited question types, DILR as well, sort of limited question types. But when it comes to quant, the syllabus is huge. And that is why when you prepare for CAT, 50% of your time almost is going to go on the quant section. Though from a weightage perspective, each of these sections, they are almost 1/3, you can say. But when it comes to the syllabus, the quant section is huge, right? It is going to consume 50% of the energy, the effort and the time that you invest when it comes to CAT preparation. So be prepared for that. See, my intent here is to not scare anybody, because I want people to understand that I can prepare for this, right? But don't start from day one and say, okay, oh, numbers are only 3 questions. Why should I even bother? Let me not do this. But that's a very bad strategy, because maybe from numbers you get, let's say, easiest questions in your slot. Then what? So don't drop anything from day one. A lot of students do that mistake, but please don't do it. Okay. So to summarize the discussion that we had today, first thing, for verbal ability and reading comprehension, right? See, you have to read a lot. There is nothing that will help you apart from this. You solve questions, obviously, that everybody does. You do a lot of RC passages, you do verbal ability questions, which pretty much everybody will do. But one thing, if you want to stay ahead in this particular game, is to read a lot and read variety of things and develop comfort with reading anything and everything. So if I, let's say, give you a passage on how penguins regulate their body temperature, you should be able to handle it with equal ease if I were to give you, let's say, when it comes to British folk music, for example. Second, for the data interpretation and logical reasoning, you have to work on improving your natural aptitude as well. That can happen in the form of solving a lot of puzzles and brain teasers. But again, don't spend a lot of time on it. This is peripheral prep. So you do about, say, 10-15 minutes per day, and that's good enough. But you spend more and more time in doing a lot of actual problems, so actual sets, and you try and remember them. See, just because you have solved more sets does not mean that you will retain all of them. But if you are able to pause after every set and explain the methodology to yourself, you will retain it better. So that retention is very, very important. And finally, when it comes to quant section, first thing is going to be, don't be scared of quant. If you are, let me know if there's anything that I can reply with when it comes to your comments. So let me know in the comment section and try and get back. But you have to be comfortable with all the topics that are there, especially when you have a lot of time to prepare for the CAT. So don't drop topics even before you start your prep. So prepare everything with equal intensity in the beginning. Over a period of time, you can develop your strength areas. So personally also, I have some areas that I'm very good at, including arithmetic. So I would say out of 5 areas that we spoke about, you have to be good at minimum 3 areas. And one of those areas has to be arithmetic. So you can't really do well on the CAT if you're not strong at arithmetic. Okay. So arithmetic, number one priority, but out of the remaining areas, try and do all of them with equal intensity in the beginning. Over a period of time, of course, build your strength in at least 3 areas so you're able to crack the CAT. So I'll see you soon in the next episode of the series Definitive Guide to CAT. Hope you're finding this useful, and if you have any questions, let me know. Thank you so much for watching. All the best to all of you.